The call that changed everything. You didn't need it anyway, my father said, his voice as casual as if he were discussing the weather. But he wasn't talking about something small. He had just admitted to stealing my entire college fund. Besides, what's done is done. No point getting upset about it now. I gripped my phone tightly, staring at the wall of my tiny London apartment. At 25, I had worked hard to get here. My final year of college was supposed to be secure, paid for by the fund I had built with scholarships, part-time jobs, and years of careful saving. But now, it was gone. How much is left? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. Left? None of it's left, honey, he said, as if it were obvious. I had some debts to clear up, but don't worry, you're smart, you'll figure something out. Figure something out, as if I had a choice. As if he hadn't just stolen years of my hard work while I was halfway across the world, studying abroad. Unable to stop him, he had remained a co-signer on the account I opened at 17, an account I had trusted him with. I see, I said quietly, forcing myself to stay steady. Well, good luck with that. That's my girl, he replied, mistaking my calm for acceptance. Always practical, just like your old dad. Listen, I've got to run, meeting some friends for drinks. We'll talk soon. Meeting friends for drinks, with my money, with my future. The reality sets in. I sat down at my small desk, looking out over the London street I had fallen in love with. This place had felt like a dream come true when I first arrived, but now, it felt like it was slipping through my fingers. 3 months. That's how long I had until I had to return home. 3 months to figure out how to pay for my senior year. 3 months to fix a disaster my own father had created. My phone buzzed again, a text from him. Don't mention this to your mom or grandmother. No need to worry them. Of course, he didn't want them to know, just like he hadn't wanted them to know about his gambling debts, his failed business ventures, the loans he took and never repaid. I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. If he thought I was just going to accept this, he didn't know me at all. Step 1, take control. I made a list. Gather evidence. I pulled up my bank statements. I found proof of every deposit I had made. I saved copies of my scholarship awards. If I was going to fight this, I needed records. Research my options. Could I take legal action? Would my school offer emergency financial aid? Could I get another job? Build a backup plan. I needed money fast. Could I tutor? Pick up extra shifts? Find remote work? This wasn't just about my education anymore. This was about proving that he didn't control my future. For years, my father had underestimated me. Good thing you're pretty, he used to say when I brought home straight A's, as if my academic success meant nothing. You can always marry rich if college doesn't work out. But I hadn't worked this hard just to let him take everything away. Step 2, expose the truth. I wasn't going to keep his secret. The first call I made was to my mother. At first, there was silence on the other end of the line. Then, she let out a slow, angry sigh. I should have seen this coming, she said. I just didn't think he'd do it to you. Next, I called my grandmother. She had always been the strongest person in our family. If anyone could help, it was her. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. Instead, she asked one question. How do we fix this? Together, we made a plan. My aunt, a lawyer, would look into legal options. My grandmother would spread the word to the rest of the family. If my father had stolen from me, had he done it to others too? The answer came quickly. Remember when Uncle Greg promised our college funds were safe with him? My cousin Jake texted. Guess we know what that meant. One by one, family members started coming forward. My father had borrowed money from relatives for years, always with a promise to pay them back. But he never did. This wasn't just about me anymore. Step 3, make him pay. Once the truth was out, everything started falling apart for him. My mother's lawyer uncovered bank records that helped her during the divorce, ensuring she got a much larger settlement than expected. My aunt forced him into a repayment plan. He would pay back what he stole from me, with interest. The family turned against him. The people who once defended him now saw him for who he really was. Even his text messages changed. At first, he was angry. How could you do this to me? I'm your father. Then, he started begging. We can work this out. Everyone makes mistakes. Why can't you forgive me? What will people think of you treating your dad this way? For the first time in my life, I wasn't falling for it. Step 4, build my own future. Through my grandmother's connections, I got a part-time job that allowed me to finish my degree. My professors helped me create a flexible schedule. I worked harder than ever before, but every step forward felt like a victory. My father showed up at my graduation, uninvited. "That's my girl," he said to anyone who would listen. "Gets her business sense from me." Before he could embarrass me further, my aunt had him escorted out. "Your success belongs to you," she told me. "He doesn't get to claim credit for what he tried to prevent." Step 5. Cut him off. The last payment from my father came a year later, the final installment of what he had stolen. He sent a note with it. "Now can we be family again?" I saved the receipt, not because I needed it, but as a reminder. My mother, now happily remarried, put it best. "He thought taking your money would keep you dependent on him. Instead, it set you free." She was right. I had built my own future. Without him. I never expected to be the one to bring my father down. At first, I wasn't even trying. I just wanted my money back. But in the process, the truth started spreading, and suddenly, I wasn't the only one demanding answers. When my father stole my college fund, I thought I was alone in my anger. But then, my cousin Jake sent me a message. "Remember when Uncle Greg told us our college funds were safe with him? Guess we know what that meant." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Was Jake saying what I thought he was? Had my father taken his money too? Soon, more messages started coming in. My cousins, aunts, and uncles started sharing their own stories. My father had been borrowing money from family members for years, always promising to pay them back, always finding excuses when he didn't. My Aunt Sarah acted fast. She helped my cousins secure their accounts before my father could touch them. One by one, his schemes were being exposed. He had spent years treating the family like his personal ATM, and for the first time, everyone was seeing it for what it was: financial abuse. Then, during my mother's divorce proceedings, even more secrets came to light. He had taken out loans in her name without telling her. He had tried to remortgage their house. He had hidden money in separate accounts, moving it around so she wouldn't find it. My mother was furious. "We kept making excuses for him," she said one evening, her voice shaking. "We let him get away with it because he was family, but he never treated us like family, he treated us like resources." My grandmother called for a family meeting, but without my father. At that meeting, everyone shared their experiences. My uncle had lent him money for a business investment that never existed. My aunt had given him cash when he claimed he was struggling, only to see him go on vacation the next month. My grandmother had covered some of his debts, thinking he had changed. He always counted on family loyalty to protect him, my aunt said, but loyalty goes both ways. And just like that, my father's world began to fall apart. The consequences: first, my mother's lawyer uncovered his hidden accounts. The divorce settlement took a huge chunk of what he had left. Then, my Aunt Sarah pressured him legally to pay me back, with interest. He had stolen my future, and now he had to fix it. But the worst blow came when the rest of the family turned their backs on him. The same people who had once given him money without question now demanded answers. He had borrowed from elderly relatives, promising them returns on investments that never existed. A regular Ponzi scheme, my aunt muttered as she collected evidence. At first, my father reacted with anger. Then, his messages became desperate. "I'm still your father. We can work this out. Everyone makes mistakes. Why can't you forgive me? What will people think of you treating your dad this way?" He had used guilt to control me for years, but this time, it wasn't working. While he flailed, I built my future. Through my grandmother's connections, I found a part-time job that let me finish my degree while working. My professors understood my situation and helped me create a flexible schedule. Every small step forward felt like a victory. One more way I was proving to myself that he no longer had control over my life. The most surprising part? The family's support. Cousins who had once brushed off his behavior now shared their own experiences. Aunts and uncles who used to defend him were now standing with me. Even distant relatives reached out to say they were proud of me for standing up to him. Then, one evening, my grandmother called. "Your father just phoned me. He wants me to talk to you about dropping the repayment plan. Says it's destroying the family." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "What did you tell him?" "That he destroyed this family himself when he stole from his own daughter. His last attempt." The final blow came on my graduation day. He showed up uninvited, acting like the proud father he had never been. "That's my girl," he announced loudly to anyone who would listen. "Gets her business sense from me." Before he could do any more damage, my Aunt Sarah had him escorted out. "Your success belongs to you," she told me later. "He doesn't get to claim credit for what he tried to prevent." By then, my father had lost nearly everything. The divorce had revealed his financial lies. Friends who had once trusted him with investments now demanded their money back. The family he had counted on for support now wanted nothing to do with him. My grandmother hosted a graduation party for me, a celebration of more than just my degree. It was a celebration of my independence. During the party, my mother pulled me aside. "Your father called me yesterday," she said. "Wanted to know if I'd convince you to drop the repayment plan. Said he's learned his lesson." "Has he?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She sighed. "No, he's learned he can't manipulate you anymore. That's not the same thing." The repayment plan my aunt arranged was strict, monthly payments straight from his paycheck. No excuses. When his scams dried up, he was finally forced to get a real job. His last email to me was bitter. "It's not fair. I'm your father. You're supposed to love me unconditionally." I took my time replying. Love isn't a blank check, and conditions are what happen when you break trust. A new chapter. A year after I confronted him, my career took off. I secured a position with a top firm in London. My degree, paid for without his help, had opened doors I never thought possible. Each success felt even sweeter, knowing I had earned it on my own. My grandmother, always my fiercest supporter, called one evening. "He wants to know if you got the job in London. Says he'd love to visit once you're settled." I laughed. "To visit or to ask for money?" "Both, probably," she said. I told him you're done funding his lifestyle. The family dynamics had shifted permanently. Once, my father had relied on the family's trust to fuel his scams. Now, the family had turned against him. My Aunt Patricia even created a group chat to track his latest manipulations. "He tried to convince my son to co-sign a car loan," she reported one day. "Told him it would help build his credit." Sound familiar? It did. He had tried the same tactic with me at 18, another attempt to trap me in financial dependence. But now, he had no power over me. The final repayment arrived on a quiet Tuesday. The last of the money he had stolen was finally returned. He attached a note. "Now can we be family again?" I filed the receipt with the rest of my records, not because I needed them anymore, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. My mother, now happily remarried, summed it up best. "He thought taking your money would keep you dependent on him. Instead, it set you free." She was right. I had built a future he could no longer touch.